When people told Reddit their past, their stories, explained themselves with Reddit stories, foretold the future. Not really. But foretold the future with Reddit stories. The best place by the monitor was kept for the Reddit teller. Welcome back to your cozy spot by the screenlight. Today, I have some new tales to impart with some interesting outcomes. Now, as I recall, this story stems from one called Mirandaho93, titled, "My Best Friend's Boyfriend Turned Out to Be a Murderer." Ominous, spooky, and, well, August at the moment, so almost time for the season. When I was about 19 or 20, my best friend in the world was dating this guy. He was really cute, funny, and sweet. I stayed with her at her apartment a lot, and he used to always come over and hang out. He lived with his great-grandmother, who was really super strict. Even though he was 18, she gave him a curfew, and if he was late, she would lock him out or call the law on him. So he was always had to be home by at least 10 p.m. Anyways, one night I was at her house, and we were drinking and playing cards and stuff. He came running through the door at 9 p.m. saying he had gotten into a fight. We didn't think anything of it, really because he wasn't exactly a golden boy, and it wasn't all that surprising. But after about 12 a.m. rolled around, we were like, "Damn, your grandmother's letting you stay out this late?" He ended up telling us that she was asleep and had locked him out. Again, we didn't think anything much of it. Happened all the time, or so we thought. Later on the next day, I ended up going home. My friend called me out that night, crying her freaking eyes out, telling me to look on Jail Tracker. I got on there and looked, and underneath his mugshot, it said murder. I was literally shocked. What the hell? Who the hell did this guy murder? I was just there. Well, it turns out, when he came and busted through the door, he had just mangled his great-grandmother to death with a hammer. He sat there and drank with us, played cards with us, and acted like nothing had ever happened. After everyone had left, he ended up telling my friend what he had done. She acted like she was going to run off with him. She went to her room and acted like she was picking up her bags, snuck in the bathroom, and called the police. It was really scary and traumatizing for all of us, for real, but especially for her. I ended up getting sentenced to 50 years or something like that. He tried to escape about 4 years after his sentencing. Looks like they added even more time. So I doubt I'll ever be seeing him again. Anyways, that's been years ago, but I randomly stumbled across this sub and it made me think of that. Well, it's definitely a lot. Kind of had to agree with a comment by Serenix. I can't imagine the composure your friend must have kept to pretend that she was getting ready to run away with him while trying to find a way to discreetly phone the police. I'm glad to know he got arrested, and I hope you guys were able to recover from this as well. It sounds chilling. Yeah, I wouldn't even know. It almost comes off as something you would see in one of the older horror movies, something like Alfred Hitchcock would produce, but wow, that's definitely something. And I'm glad you guys are okay. Happens more often than you think. Now, this next story stems from _baby_blue_. That's a lot of underscores. I hope one day that you can just be baby blue. titled, I Found Out My Neighbor Used to Watch Me Shower When I Was a Kid. Ugh. There's one thing I can't stand. It's that word. I'm 22 years old now. We used to have a neighbor who was around 60 to 70 years old. He died a few years ago. When he was still alive, he would cause us so much trouble. Scratched our car, poisoned our apple trees and grass, blew up a firework near me to cause me to temporarily go deaf in one ear when I was 4, all kinds of things. What the heck is this domestic terrorist? Oh my God. His son was a judge in our city, so pretty much everything we took to court was against us. I remember my dad often called us from work to tell us not to be home alone, and we would have to stay at grandma's. When I was little, I think around 6 to 7, I would frequently have nightmares about seeing a face outside of the bathroom window. The window is above our bathtub. It's high enough that no one can actually see in unless they climb the roof of our shed, which is underneath the bathroom window in our garden. Coincidentally, the shed is directly next to a fence that separates our garden from the neighbor's one. I still remember the dreams. I remember having them pretty much every other night. I never told my parents when I was little because we never really liked to talk about anything. So I didn't really share anything that was happening to me. Well, I grew up thinking they were just dreams and that was it. I did mention them to my therapist last year because we were discussing some of my personal problems and I felt like this was kind of connected. After coming home, my mom asked me what I talked about with my therapist, so I finally shared I used to have such dreams. I never thought about them being real, but she told me I actually did tell her I saw our neighbor on our shed's roof. I don't remember telling her that, but she said I did mention it several times, and even my friends told her they saw him. They saw him there when they would come over to our house, and it creeped them out. Apparently, I never mentioned him watching me shower, but after she told me that, it really clicked for me, and it was as if I suddenly remembered that, yeah, I do think it was him. It would make sense, and the fact that it happened still creeps me out. There was another incident that creeped me out. It happened when I was around 9 to 10. I went to the balcony in the evening. The balcony door was in my room, and I often went there to call my cat home in the evening. But this time, I saw a person standing in the middle of our garden. It was already dark out, and I couldn't really tell who it was. I waited for a little bit to see what the person does, but I didn't really see him move. It was as if he was just standing and staring in front of him. I called out, "Dad!" because obviously I expected it to be him, even though I found it odd. But the person looked up at me, and even though it was dark, I could tell it was someone else. I think it was partly because my eyes just adjusted to the dark and I could make out the silhouette of the person better. I went to tell my dad, who was downstairs, but when he looked, there was no one there. When I went back upstairs to my room and went to the balcony again, I noticed my neighbor's back door closing, just when I looked there. I don't remember if it was directly the next day or a few days later, but our grass turned brown and we found out it was poisoned, most of the grass being out of reach from his property. Wow. I hate to say it, Baby Blue, but yeah, it does look like you had some repressed memories there, and you lived next to a literal domestic terrorist. That is one petty old guy. And a, I can't use the word, but let's just say that I'm very happy that you're okay. I I do have to agree with a couple of these comments that I can read down here. One, that the neighbor sounds like a total creep and weirdo, and that FIFEP is glad that nothing super bad occurred. Still an incredibly scary story for you to deal with. I'm glad that you're okay, and I hope that the old guy did not go out peacefully. This next tale stems from one called Best Mossad Agent. I hope you don't come after me for reading your story. The story is called My Earliest Memory of a Nightmare Turned Out to Be a Real Event. First-time poster and long-time reader. So, the title sounds like a no-sleep story, and that's the first thing I thought when I first found out about this about 2 months ago. I've been busy dealing with the wake of a family tragedy since then, but now that things are returning to the new normal, I figure it's a good time to share. I'm sorry in advance for any formatting issues. I'm on my phone. Buckle in. This is a long one. First, I'll describe the nightmare. It's a very short dream, and like I said, it's a very clear memory just because of how scary it was. I was about 4 or 5 years old, perhaps 6 at most, and my twin brother and I had a bunk bed in a room at the furthest end of the house we grew up in. The nightmare had me in my bed, looking out the window to see a red sky. The kind it gets in the early dawn hours before sunrise, but light still colors the sky. The next and only thing I remember in this nightmare is that a man with crazy blue-colored eyes and a bald head appears at the window and stares right at me. The nightmare ends there, but I remember just how much I screamed and screamed about it. I don't know where my brother was at the time when I woke up screaming, and the only thing I can remember from when I woke up was having my mom come and get me and calm me down as she took me to her bedroom down the hall. I only remember that so well because I wondered where my dad was at the time. Fast forward to this May, and my father's in the hospital in the country he lives in, Colombia, and my twin brother and our older sister are staying in a hotel about a 5-minute walk away from the hospital he's staying in the ICU at. One night, after a long day of being there for Dad and for the extended family, my siblings and I return to the hotel and sit together to have a couple beers and just try to relax after all of it. We start discussing things, just trying to unwind, but somehow the discussion of nightmares and dreams come up, and I bring up the above story. Without missing a beat, my sister straight up explains that had really happened, that some guy really did look through my window, and that she remembers the whole thing. My sister, who is 5 years older than my brother and I, so this would make her 9 to 10 years old, had her bedroom adjacent to the bedroom my brother and I shared. Her room faced our front lawn and street, while our room faced the neighbor's house and the driveway with a very low fence between the two houses. While she didn't get into too much detail about the days before the nightmare event, she said that she had been followed by a bald man in a truck as she rode her bike home with some friends a couple of times before. The day immediately before the nightmare was no different, but the man this time actually drove right past the house. At the time, she was a latchkey kid. Since my brother and I had to go to a special school about 45 minutes away from our hometown for a speech impediment that many twins have, and my mom had to pick us up rather than be home for my sister after school, but she was never home alone for more than an hour. That afternoon and evening was pretty normal, as she remembers it. My dad came home from his job. He worked as a part-time cop and worked in a local hardware store, and we all had dinner. We did homework, played, and did usual family things before bed. That night, around 12 to 1 a.m., this bald-headed dude had parked down the street at a small industrial park and walked up to our house and tried to get in through my sister's window, which woke her up and she screamed when she saw the man nearly opening the window as it wasn't locked. My dad stormed in and tried to shove the guy out or tried to hit him with the nightstick he had. My sister doesn't remember exactly, and this caused the guy to run off, but only for a short time, as he came back a moment later to try to get into the window in my room. He tried opening the window, but it was locked because my mom didn't want my brother and I to open it because our bed was right up against it. My sister said I screamed out as loud as I could, and my mom went to get my brother. And while my dad tried to go after him by running out the front door to chase him, but to no avail. As the guy hauled ass right through our backyard, the way our backyard was situated had it backed up right against a small rail yard that is part of this aforementioned small industrial park down the street from us. Between our small neighborhood and that rail yard was a good amount of very dense trees that always made the backyard very, very dark. So my dad didn't want to get attacked by him there, so instead he went back inside our house, called the police, and then out to our elderly neighbor to make sure they were okay while our mom took care of us kids. That is all my sister could remember from that night herself, as this was a really long time ago. Neither of us could recall anything else that happened after that, and the story just sort of stops there. My father sadly passed away in the hospital, so we aren't able to ask him, and given all of that, none of us have thought to ask our mom yet, but maybe I'll ask her soon. But for now, to the bald-headed creep who tried to do God knows what to my family, let's not meet. Wow. I'm kind of surprised that you said that your father was a part-time cop. I don't know what the limits are for part-time cops. I don't know if they're allowed a firearm or anything like that, but Lord knows if that was me or my wife, my child, that guy would not have gotten away. Wow, the fact that he had the gall to come back and try again, that is terrifying. That guy knew what he wanted and he was willing to risk it all again. And that's when that's a point where if they come back and it looks like it was pretty instant, like within a 10-minute span, that's when he doesn't leave after that. Thank you for joining me by the monitor. And to everyone listening and enjoying this content, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe to hear more of these stories stemming from tragic to comedic to downright horrific. And as always, see you in the next chapter.